Chapter 1: The Question That Haunted Me. My name is Rex, and for 2 years, I've been haunted by a woman who was in my life for only 6 months. It was a Tuesday morning in downtown Chicago when I finally admitted I needed help. I was sitting in my office, staring at my computer screen, but my mind was somewhere else, entirely lost in memories of Isabella, a woman who had left my life without drama, without explanations, and without looking back. I'm a 32-year-old marketing director, successful by most measures. I have a good career, a nice apartment in Lincoln Park, and what my friends would call no trouble dating. But for 2 years, every woman I met was measured against the memory of someone who had simply ... disappeared. Isabella wasn't the most beautiful woman I'd ever dated. She wasn't the funniest or the most accomplished. Yet something about her had lodged itself so deeply in my psyche that I found myself thinking about her at the strangest moments during important meetings, while watching movies, even on dates with other women. The strangest part, I couldn't explain why. We had dated for 6 months. No major fights, no dramatic breakups. One day, she simply said she thought we should see other people. When I asked why, she said something that still confused me. "Rex, I need to choose myself right now." She hugged me goodbye, and that was it. No tears, no anger, just ... calm finality. That morning in my office, staring at yet another email I couldn't focus on, I finally asked myself the question I'd been avoiding. What is wrong with me? Why can't I move on? I had tried everything: dating apps, therapy, even a few rebounds. Nothing worked. Isabella's absence felt bigger than her presence ever had, and I was starting to worry I was losing my mind. That's when I remembered my college roommate Jake mentioning a psychologist in Texas who specialized in what he called the psychology of unforgettable connections. Desperate for answers, I looked up Dr. Walker Teddy and sent him an email that very day. Chapter 2: The Call That Changed Everything. Dr. Teddy responded within 24 hours, offering a video consultation. 3 days later, I found myself staring at my laptop screen, talking to a distinguished man in his 60s with kind but penetrating eyes. "Tell me about her," he said simply. For the next hour, I found myself describing not just Isabella, but the way she had made me feel, both drawn to her and somehow unsettled by her presence. She never seemed to need my approval. She had her own interests, her own friends, her own life that felt complete whether I was in it or not. She was different, I said, struggling to find the right words. Most women I date seem to adjust themselves to fit what they think I want. Isabella never did that. She was just herself. Always. Dr. Teddy nodded knowingly. "Rex, have you ever heard of Carl Jung's theory of archetypal projection?" I shook my head. "Jung discovered that we don't fall in love with people," Dr. Teddy explained. "We fall in love with what they represent to our unconscious mind. When someone becomes truly unforgettable, it's usually because they've triggered something deep within us, something we haven't integrated into our own personality." He leaned forward slightly. "Tell me, when you think about Isabella, what feelings come up?" I thought carefully. Admiration, but also ... discomfort. Like she could see parts of me I didn't want to look at. Like she was challenging me just by being herself. "Exactly," Dr. Teddy said. "She became what Jung called an anima figure for you, a representation of the feminine qualities you haven't developed within yourself. Her independence, her self-containment, her ability to choose herself over pleasing others. These are aspects you're drawn to because they're underdeveloped in your own psyche." I felt something click into place. So I'm not crazy for not being able to forget her. Not at all. You're experiencing what happens when someone touches your soul in a way that demands growth. The question is, are you ready to do the work? Chapter 3: Understanding the Mirror. Over the next several weeks, Dr. Teddy guided me through what he called the 5 stages of archetypal integration, a process he had developed through years of research with men and women across North America who had experienced similar unforgettable connections. The first stage, he explained during our second session, is recognizing that she was a mirror. Everything you found compelling about Isabella reflects qualities you need to develop within yourself. He shared a case study from his work in Toronto with Michael, a 35-year-old lawyer who had been obsessed with his ex-girlfriend for 3 years. Michael kept saying his ex was the most independent woman he'd ever met. But when we dug deeper, we discovered that Michael had never learned to be truly independent himself. He had gone from his parents' house to college, to marriage, to another relationship, never spending significant time alone or developing his own interests outside of work. The woman he couldn't forget had forced him to confront his own emotional dependence. Dr. Teddy continued. She wasn't unforgettable because she was perfect. She was unforgettable because she mirrored what he needed to become. I started seeing my own patterns clearly. I had always been the partner who adapted, who compromised, who sought validation through relationships. Isabella's self-containment had been both attractive and threatening because it showed me what authentic independence looked like. Your unconscious mind is trying to tell you something, Dr. Teddy said. Isabella represented psychological wholeness, the ability to love from choice rather than need. That's why you can't forget her. Chapter 4: The Uncomfortable Truth. The second stage was the most difficult, acknowledging why Isabella had left. Most people think someone leaves because of what they did wrong, Dr. Teddy explained. But in archetypal relationships, people often leave because staying would require them to betray their authentic self. He shared research from the University of Melbourne about what they called authentic disconnection. When psychologically healthy, people choose to leave relationships that require them to diminish themselves. Isabella left because she recognized something about your dynamic that you hadn't seen yet, Dr. Teddy said gently. She saw that you were seeking completion through her rather than bringing your own wholeness to the relationship. This was hard to hear, but as I reflected on our 6 months together, I began to see the truth. I had been subtly trying to make myself indispensable to her, always available, always accommodating. I thought I was being loving, but actually, I was being needy. She chose herself, I said, finally understanding. Exactly. And that choice to honor her own integrity over staying in a relationship that didn't serve her his, what made her unforgettable. She demonstrated something you had never seen before. The courage to walk away from what isn't right, even when it's comfortable. Dr. Teddy shared a study from Stanford University showing that people who practice values-based decision-making, choosing what aligns with their authentic self over what feels safe or expected, report higher life satisfaction and form more meaningful relationships. Isabella was living this principle, he explained, and witnessing it triggered something in your unconscious, the recognition that you would never learn to do the same. Chapter 5: The Shadow Work. The third stage involved confronting what Jung called the shadow, the parts of myself I had been avoiding. Why do you think you've never developed the kind of independence Isabella had? Dr. Teddy asked during our 4th session. As I explored this question, uncomfortable truths began emerging. I realized I had been taught that my value came from being useful to others, from being needed. The idea of being alone, of pursuing my own interests without considering how they affected a romantic partner, felt selfish and scary. I've never actually been single, I admitted. Not really. I always move from one relationship to another. Dr. Teddy nodded. This is common, especially for men who weren't taught that their emotional life was their own responsibility. You've been outsourcing your sense of wholeness to romantic partners. He shared a case study from Vancouver about David, a 29-year-old who had similar patterns. David realized he had never developed hobbies, friendships, or interests that weren't somehow connected to impressing women or finding romantic validation. When his unforgettable woman left, it forced him to confront the emptiness he had been avoiding. What happened to David? I asked. He spent a year learning to be alone without being lonely. He discovered photography, developed deep friendships with men, traveled solo, and most importantly, learned to validate himself. When he eventually started dating again, his relationships were completely different because he was relating from wholeness rather than need. I felt a mix of excitement and terror. The idea of being truly alone, of developing my own life independent of romantic validation, felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Chapter 6: The Practical Work. Dr. Teddy didn't leave me to figure this out alone. He gave me specific assignments based on his research with over 400 men who had gone through similar transformations. The fourth stage is practical integration, he explained. You need to actively develop the qualities Isabella represented. My first assignment was radical. I had to stay single for 6 months and focus on building what he called psychological independence. Week 1 to 4. Learning to be alone, I had to spend at least 4 evenings per week alone, without distracting myself with work, TV, or social media, just sitting with my own thoughts and feelings. This was torture at first. I realized how much I had been avoiding silence, how uncomfortable I was with my own company. But gradually, something shifted. I began having conversations with myself, noticing my thoughts and feelings without immediately seeking someone else to validate them. Week 5 to 8. Developing individual interests. I had to choose 3 activities that interested me personally, regardless of whether they might impress a future partner. I chose rock climbing, cooking, and learning Spanish, things I had always wanted to try but never pursued because I was too focused on relationships. The rock climbing was particularly transformative. There's something about being alone on a wall, responsible only for your own safety and progress, that forces you to develop Week 9 to 12. Building male friendships. Dr. Teddy explained that many men who struggle with romantic obsession lack deep friendships with other men. You've been expecting women to meet all your emotional needs, he said. That's too much pressure for any relationship. I began reaching out to male colleagues and old friends, suggesting activities that had nothing to do with talking about women or dating. We went hiking, played basketball, attended concerts. Slowly, I began experiencing the satisfaction of male camaraderie, something I had neglected for years. Chapter 7: The Setback. 3 months into my transformation, I had a major setback. I ran into Isabella at a coffee shop in River North. She looked exactly as I remembered, confident, serene, completely comfortable in her own skin. We chatted for about 10 minutes. She was warm but not flirtatious, interested but not invested. When she mentioned she was seeing someone, I felt that familiar pang of loss and jealousy. That night, I called Dr. Teddy in a panic. I saw her, and all the progress I thought I'd made just disappeared. I wanted to ask her out again. I wanted to convince her we should try again. Rex, Dr. Teddy said calmly, this is perfectly normal. You're being tested. The question is, what did you learn from the encounter? As I processed the experience, I realized something important. While I still felt drawn to Isabella, I no longer felt desperate or incomplete without her. The months of being alone had given me a foundation of self-worth that didn't depend on her validation. I wanted her, I told Dr. Teddy, but I didn't need her, and I could feel the difference. That's the breakthrough, he said. You're beginning to understand the difference between wanting someone from wholeness versus needing someone from emptiness. Chapter 8. The Integration. The fifth and final stage was what Dr. Teddy called integration, bringing together everything I had learned into a new way of being in relationships. The goal isn't to become emotionally unavailable, he explained. It's to become emotionally self-sufficient while remaining open to deep connection. He shared research from the University of British Columbia showing that people who had completed individuation work formed more satisfying, long-term relationships because they brought their whole selves to the partnership rather than seeking completion through it. 6 months after my encounter with Isabella, I felt like a different person. I had my own life, my own interests, my own sense of purpose that existed independently of romantic relationships. I was still open to love, but I no longer felt desperate for it. The irony, Dr. Teddy observed during one of our final sessions, is that in learning to be genuinely independent, you become much more attractive to psychologically healthy people. You're no longer seeking someone to complete, you're looking for someone to share your completeness with. Chapter 9. New Relationship, New Understanding. 8 months after beginning my work with Dr. Teddy, I met Sarah at a photography class I was taking purely for my own enjoyment. She was an architect who shared my love of travel and had an infectious laugh that drew me to her immediately. But this time, something was different. Instead of trying to impress her or make myself indispensable, I simply enjoyed her company. I didn't check my phone obsessively waiting for her texts. I didn't rearrange my schedule to accommodate her every whim. I continued with my rock climbing, my Spanish lessons, my male friendships, and surprisingly, this made our relationship stronger, not weaker. "You're very centered," Sarah commented about a month into our dating. "You seem comfortable with yourself in a way that's really attractive." I found myself able to be vulnerable with Sarah without being needy, to love her without losing myself. When we had disagreements, I could express my authentic opinions without fear of losing her approval. When she needed space, I could give it without feeling threatened. Most importantly, I understood that if Sarah ever needed to choose herself the way Isabella had, I would respect that choice rather than taking it as a rejection of my worth. Chapter 10. Understanding Isabella's Gift. A year after my transformation began, I finally understood what Isabella had given me. She hadn't been cruel or selfish when she left. She had been showing me, through her example, what authentic self-love looked like. Her ability to choose herself over staying in a relationship that didn't serve her had forced me to confront my own lack of self-relationship. Her independence had revealed my emotional dependence. Her wholeness had exposed my fragmentation. She was a catalyst, Dr. Teddy explained during one of our final sessions. Jung believed that some people come into our lives not to stay, but to wake us up. Isabella woke you up to aspects of yourself that needed development. I began to see Isabella not as the woman who got away, but as a teacher who had appeared exactly when I needed to learn about authentic independence. Her departure hadn't been a rejection, it had been a gift wrapped in temporary pain. Dr. Teddy shared a case study from Auckland about James, a man who had a similar experience. James spent 3 years obsessing over a woman who had left him. When he finally did the inner work, he realized she had been the most important teacher of his life, not because of what she gave him while she was there, but because of what her absence forced him to develop within himself. Chapter 11. Full Circle. 2 years after beginning my journey with Dr. Teddy, I received an unexpected message. Isabella reached out through LinkedIn, mentioning she had seen an article I had written about men's mental health and personal development. "I'm really proud of the work you're doing," she wrote. "You seem like you found your center." We met for coffee this time, at my suggestion and without any hidden agenda. I simply wanted to thank her. "I want you to know," I told her, "that leaving me was probably the kindest thing you could have done. It forced me to grow in ways I never would have if you had stayed." Isabella smiled, and I saw in her expression a recognition of something. "I could sense that you were seeking something in me that you needed to find in yourself," she said. "I'm glad you found it." We talked for an hour to whole people, enjoying each other's company without need or desperation. When we parted, I felt complete closure for the first time. That evening, I called Dr. Teddy to share the experience. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Grateful," I said immediately. Not just to Isabella, but to the whole experience. Even the pain was necessary. "That's integration," Dr. Teddy said. "When you can look back on a difficult experience and see it as essential to your growth, you've transformed the wound into wisdom." Chapter 12. Becoming the Teacher. Today, 3 years after my journey began, I work with Dr. Teddy as a peer counselor, helping other men who are struggling with similar patterns of romantic obsession and emotional dependence. The men I work with always start with the same question: why can't I forget her? But what they're really asking is, what part of myself am I not seeing? I share my story not to offer quick fixes, but to show that the pain of an unforgettable woman can be the beginning of the most important relationship they'll ever develop, the one with themselves. Through Dr. Teddy's research and my own experience, I've learned that women become unforgettable for psychological reasons, not romantic ones. They represent qualities we need to develop, mirror aspects of ourselves we haven't integrated, and challenge us to grow beyond our current limitations. The women who leave with dignity, who choose themselves over staying where they're not valued, who love from wholeness rather than need. These women become unforgettable because they model what authentic self-relationship looks like. Chapter 13. The Ripple Effect. My transformation had effects I never anticipated. My relationship with Sarah continued to deepen as I brought more authenticity and self-awareness to our partnership. My friendships with men became richer as I learned to be vulnerable without being needy. My career flourished as I developed genuine confidence rather than the performance of confidence. Most importantly, I began attracting people who were also doing their own psychological work: friends, colleagues, and romantic partners who understood that healthy relationships require two whole people choosing each other from freedom rather than need. I started a men's group in Chicago focused on what we called authentic masculinity, helping men develop emotional intelligence, independence, and the capacity for healthy relationships. The group grew from 4 men meeting in my living room to over 30 men participating in regular workshops. Dr. Teddy often says that individual transformation creates ripple effects that touch many lives. I experienced this firsthand as the men in our group began forming healthier relationships with their partners, children, and friends. Chapter 14. The Deeper Understanding. Through my work with Dr. Teddy and my own continued growth, I came to understand that Isabella represented something Jung called the anima, the inner feminine aspect that all men need to integrate to become psychologically whole. Her independence had challenged my dependence. Her self-containment had revealed my emotional neediness. Her ability to choose herself had exposed my inability to do the same. Her authenticity had shown me how much of my personality was performance designed to gain approval. The anima often appears in our lives through relationships with women who embody qualities we need to develop, Dr. Teddy explained. But the goal isn't to possess these women, it's to integrate what they represent into our own character. This understanding transformed how I approached all my relationships. Instead of seeking women to complete me, I began appreciating them for who they were, while using our interactions to understand myself more deeply. I learned that the most attractive thing a man can offer is his own psychological wholeness, not perfection, but self-awareness, emotional responsibility, and the capacity to love from choice rather than desperation. Chapter 15. Full Circle, a New Beginning. As I write this story today, 5 years after my first session with Dr. Teddy, I can honestly say that Isabella was one of the most important people in my life, precisely because she had the courage to leave it. Her departure forced me to confront aspects of myself I had been avoiding for decades. Her example showed me what authentic self-love looked like. Her absence created the space I needed to develop my own psychological independence. Sarah and I are now engaged, and our relationship is built on a foundation I never could have created before my work with Dr. Teddy. We love each other from wholeness rather than need, support each other's individual growth rather than seeking completion through each other. But perhaps most importantly, I've learned to be my own source of validation, purpose, and fulfillment. I no longer need someone else to choose me to feel worthy. I choose myself every day, and from that choice, I'm able to offer authentic love to others. Dr. Teddy often says that the goal of psychological work isn't to avoid pain, but to transform it into wisdom. The pain of losing Isabella became the catalyst for the most important growth of my life. 2 men reading this, who are haunted by a woman they can't forget. She's not unforgettable because she was perfect. She's unforgettable because she represents aspects of yourself that are calling to be developed. The question isn't how to get her back, it's how to become the whole person she reflected back to you. And to women who have had to choose themselves over staying where they weren't valued, your departure may have caused temporary pain, but it also planted seeds of transformation that can last a lifetime. Your courage to honor your own integrity becomes a gift that keeps giving, even to people you'll never see again. Conclusion: the gift of unforgettable love. Carl Jung believed that our greatest wounds often contain our greatest gifts. The wound of loving someone who chose to leave became the gift of learning to choose myself. Isabella will always hold a special place in my heart, not as the woman who got away, but as the teacher who appeared exactly when I needed to learn about authentic love. Her willingness to leave when staying would have meant betraying herself showed me what integrity looks like in action. Today, when I think of her, I feel only gratitude. She gave me the most precious gift possible, the push I needed to become a whole person, capable of loving from choice rather than need. The woman you can't forget isn't your problem to solve, she's your soul's invitation to grow. The question isn't why you can't move on. The question is, what parts of yourself is she calling you to develop? Your unforgettable woman was never meant to be possessed. She was meant to be a mirror, a teacher, a catalyst for your own transformation. The love that feels lost was never lost, was planted as a seed of your own becoming. And perhaps that's the most beautiful truth of all. Sometimes the deepest love shows up not as someone who stays, but as someone who leaves at exactly the right moment to set your soul free. The journey from needing to be chosen to choosing yourself is the path from boy to man, from dependence to freedom, from possessive love to authentic love. It's a journey worth taking, and it begins the moment you're willing to look in the mirror she held up to your soul.